folks, welcome back to the HS Tech channel. In this video we're going to look at configuring and tailoring a VMCMS system. Now it's pretty much all the same for all the different versions that are post VMESA release 2, so that's what we're going to look at here. So let's go ahead and log in as mate. And right away we're going to see a little hint here about this disk CF2, forced read-only by system, stable by system. Huh? Well, you see, that is actually something called a parm disk, and the parm disk is the first thing we're going to look at in this particular episode. The parm disk is something that contains the VMCMS nuclei as well as the system configuration files. Essentially what those are system config and logo config, and that's pretty much all you get in terms of, I guess you could call it the primary configuration file, besides the directory. The directory is just stored as a binary file on the disk, but we're going to go ahead and edit that system config file. So the first thing you need to do is actually type cp release a. Now I can't do this because I've already de-accessed that, but you'll see something about disk scheduled for release and then released. At that point you need to detach cf1 and you need to link mate, which we're logged in as mate, so we can actually do link star cf1 cfw1 mw. And then we can access cf1 as file mode q. And you're going to see we have some interesting things on here. If we edit system config q, you're going to see this right here is my system config file, and this one right here will specify all of the kernel parameters, or the nucleus parameters if you will. Now I'm actually running a P390 here, although this machine is... There are some video editing tricks that I'm using to make this machine look a little bit faster than what it really is, so just keep that in mind. But let me get rid of that ridiculous ruler. So, okay, if you want you can go, you'd think I would key these in, but I actually haven't. Don't worry about defining extra time zone boundaries. Obviously, this machine has not been updated in basically forever, and it could stand to be updated, but it's not. So, right away here, this right here, let's say that you want to enlarge your spool space, and we can look at doing that later, but you don't necessarily need to do that. But if you do enlarge your spool space, you need to key in the DASZ Volseer right here. Now privilege classes, those are pretty expected. Now this right here, scroll down a little bit, this right here will be your like tuning parameters if you will. So do we want people to be able to change their privilege classes on the fly? Yes. Do we want people to see system log message rather than the one that's stored in some kind of nucleus buffer? Yes. Do we want to automatically do a warm start? In this case, no. I think on most VMESA images, if you install them from the media, you're going to get this as the default on disable, but I think that the P390 ADCDs have this as enabled, so you're probably going to want to keep this as disabled. Do not clear the temporary disks at IPL time, because that's a horrible waste of IO writing, so it's a bit of a lag out there. So at this point, the rest of these aren't too terribly useful. Oh yeah, this is actually kind of useful. You can actually go in the login screen, you can type on logon user password, and you can hit enter. That's a bit of like a security issue, so you may not want to do that. How big do you want VDisks to be? There you go. This one right here, if you set it to infinite, I willingly set it to infinite, I think, although it could be infinite default, but this one is allowed to be infinite because I know exactly how much storage I have on the system, and it can cope with it. Alright. How in the world did this get misspelled? Okay, this right here is where you basically hard code devices. This is not nearly as good as actually editing HTTP IO and regenerating the nucleus, which I'm definitely not going to cover in this video. That's like deep level VM systems programming stuff. But this will get you pretty far if you have like a reader and a 1403 printer defined. This is just like just a standard P390 emulation. Do we want automatic device sensing? You bet. Operator consoles, 200. 200 is the actual operator console for the system. Emergency message consoles, yeah. Okay, system underscore console is whatever the nucleus thinks the actual system console is. So when the loader, the IPL, the SAL IPL standalone initial program loader, standalone initial program loader, when that runs, you can specify a console. There you go. Okay, this one right here, these are your escape keys, if you will. You can type qterm and see them. Okay, printer forms, who cares? Parm disks. Bam. This one right here is the initial parm disk. This is important. If you mess this line up, you're gonna hose your system. Logo config, this will specify what your login screen is. And then any products that you may want. Okay, yeah, we know. Also, you should use the cp syntax command. So after you've edited this, type cp syntax system config file mode, and it will tell you if you got any errors. Now we'll scroll back up and we'll search for VMESA. It's this one right here. This right here is where you change that little system name thingamajig at the bottom. Alright, now if we look at all the logo files, this right here, there you go. Pretty standard VM logo. Okay, now let's say you're done. We're going to release Q. We're going to detach CF1. Now we're going to cp access maint CF1A. What? Oh, that's kind of ridiculous. You do not have the proper directory authorization to link to a mini-disk with the mode of SR. Oh, really? Why? I am maint. You must listen to me. Oh my gosh, okay. Alright, so I paused the recording there while I just sat around and guessed, and I actually guessed the command right on the first try. There you go, cp access maint CF1A RR sync. So that's the access mode, and then sync just means do it now rather than schedule an access. So at this point you know how to change this, and you know how to change the logon screen logo, because if I log off and reconnect via Telnet 37, you'll see it's the same logo. It's not the one that I have that says warning parm disk not accessed. Now let's consider TCP/IP configuration. So what you have to do now is log in as TCP maint. Actually, well, first we'll log in as maint. And we have TCP maint direct. Actually, no, we do not. Well, actually, let's grab our TCP/IP directory entry. And don't worry, we'll look at how you do this in a second. Of course, this here is the user that runs TCP/IP, and you can see that one of these disks, possibly this one, needs to have a profile TCP/IP file, and that's literally what it is, profile TCP/IP. Alright, so we're going to... Actually, we will link TCP/IP 191.591 read. Okay, this is not what you want. You can edit sys1 TCP/IP. Of course, this right here is a heavily modified, updated, modified, destroyed, and repaired VMESA 2.4 ADCD image from the stack of CDs I've got sitting on the dresser behind me. But the default, they want you to use this, but don't. That's ridiculous. So instead, we're going to look at TCP maint 198. And we'll just replace that. This right here has everything you need. This has your host file, and I'm going to tell you the host file is not what you think it is. It's a little bit different. And of course we have system DTC Farms. This is something that you need to edit, and of course, apparently I already went past it. Somewhere in here is profile TCP/IP. There we go. So let's walk through configuring some of this stuff, because obviously, it just scrolled by. Profile TCP/IP, that's the one we want. This right here is gonna be your TCP/IP configuration. So let's give us a quick scroll through, and you'll see, bam, right away, a bunch of stuff. These are the defaults that I use. These are the defaults that IBM gives you. They're okay. Okay. Do you want to inform operator? Yes. If you have like a problem, then go over and look over, and there you go. Alright. Down here, assorted parms. Sometimes you need to set this up. The only thing you could conceivably need is uncomment this, and allow restrict low ports. And that right there will be your ports 1 through 24, 24/7. Sorry, no, it's 1 through 1023. low ports. 99% of the time you don't want this enabled because that allows some random user to bind like telnet or something. Okay. I recommend not enabling this unless you like actually need security. Syscontact, blah blah blah. I love keeping this to default because this just sounds cool. Sounds like I'm performing surgery on my mainframe on a card. Okay, don't use Autolog. Please do not Autolog it using the Autolog command as operator. Okay, ports. A lot of this is of dubious use. Sometimes you need to find these, sometimes you don't. I obviously had to, but actually I'm going way too fast here. I was just looking ahead in the file. Sometimes you probably want to comment all these out. You don't always need to. If you have restrict low ports enabled, you have to comment these out. Because this right here is who can use these. Basically, like FTP serve can bind port 20. But because I don't have restrict low ports enabled, bam, anyone can bind these. And it's just like, you want them, you got them. And of course I don't want PVM to Autolog. I added these for PVM. And we may look at PVM. PVM's great. It's basically a poor man's VTAM. CCS term name. This right here is the LU name or the LU name prefix when you telnet in with a dumb line mode terminal. Okay, now, this is where if you've been asleep this whole time, wake up. I'm kidding. Alright, right here, boom. This right here is what actually defines your physical port. So, device LCS0 that's just a device name. This is a 3172 LAN channel station compatible interface, also called an OSA. So if you're on an actual like modern System Z and you are the unfortunate VM systems programmer and you're watching this video, this will not work for a QDIO type Ethernet. Okay, check the manual for that. It's easy. It looks basically the same as this, but this is for standard LCS traditional OSAs. And of course this is on address E20, which is the P390 default. And then we're going to do link on Ethernet 0, or this is the actual interface name, if you will, and it's Ethernet as opposed to token ring on port 0 on interface LCS 0. So these two map together. This right here is the port number. If you have one of those fancy multi-port OSAs, there you go. And then this is the link name. Because now we go down here and we specify our IP address. In this case, this machine has been assigned this IP address for the past like 8 years, ever since I was like a young lad running a mainframe for some silly reason. And then down here, this right here is your next hop. And since we're, well, okay. You would think that VM would be smart enough, or really any of the System 370 TCP IP stacks would be smart enough to automatically figure out what the on-link route is, but apparently not. You know, this is the bad old days. You have to specify this yourself. You know, this is like manual malfunction bingo right here. So you have to manually specify what the network address is, and it's this. We are the next hop. This is on port ETH0. MTU is default size, which is 1500 or 1492. I'm sorry, 1496, depending on the phase of the moon, apparently. Subnet mask is 0. Subnet value is not listed. Okay, if you have a non-standard subnet mask, good luck. That's all I can say. It is ridiculous to actually come up with that. Default net, this will specify a router. I am not actually allowing this machine to route out on the internet, simply because this thing is way too slow and way too out of date. Alright, and I don't need a default route, why would I? Okay, this right here is if you're using, I believe this is for RIP, Routing Information Protocol. This is for the Route D server, if you will. Okay, translate. Don't worry about this, it's a little bit tricky to explain. I'm probably going to do a more detailed video on TCP/IP, honestly, because there's a lot of stuff you can configure here, and this is just like the bare minimum. And then you need to start the link, not the interface, but the link. Alright? Now we're going to xedit system DTC Farms. Now this right here needs to be, okay, this, okay, there's two system DTC Farms files. There's one on TCP mate 198, and there's one on TCP mate 592. And there's one on TCP mate 591 usually. This one right here basically needs to be the same. This one is what clients will see, and everyone. This one right here, you won't necessarily, I actually don't edit this, I literally just have in profile exec attach E20 through E21 star to attach the link to the Ethernet card, but this one right here is your basically your server parameters. If you're running NFS, by the way, in case you're just dying to run VMNFS, which I highly recommend doing, because you can discover a bug in Windows Explorer where it can't display file dates from before 1981, because welcome to VM, you can actually find plenty of files that you can untar and extract that are well older than that. Runtime C, anonymous yes, and disable security. And this will actually get NFS to run in case you need, if you're like unable to get NFS to run for some reason. Sorry, excuse me. LPD configuration, etc bootp tab. That is literally just for the bootp daemon. I recommend not using that because you could break your network. SMTP config. This is basically all the server config stuff. SNA LNKA. This is for an SNA or a TCP/IP over SNA link. Please don't use that, it's so bad. Security memo, there's no security here. And then of course VMNFS config. You may need to see this, who knows. This right here, bam, that's a bunch of stuff. So we got some miscellaneous things showing up in there, so not too terribly difficult. Please disable this or you will have authentication problems galore. VM file type translation, yeah, there you go. Okay, now there are a few other things that may be important. So another thing that is pretty much required if we look at all the files on X, this is also where your TCP/IP headers are if you wish to compile a program, but there are a few things on here as well as the translation tables that sort of map. So really what we're looking for here is anything that may be of interest. So GDDM for X11, there you go. More headers, there's going to be tons of those. A few text libs, of course those are static libraries. And of course this is where all your commands are. But there's also a backup profile TCP/IP, do not add this one. It is not the one that will be used. And of course there's a few sample client and server TCP/IP samples if you need to see or want to see what an old one looks like. There you go. TCP/IP control if you want to regenerate. There's our telnet command. Of course, we have plenty of help CMS here. And of course, as always, those translation tables. And there's tons of these. We'll be here all day. Oh, there we go. Alright, so now we're going to look for something called TCP/IP data. And that sounds ridiculous, but this is basically the file that's on mate, or TCP mate 592, that's essentially got the keys to the kingdom that specifies pretty much all the other parameters that you'd expect to see with the TCP/IP stack. So right away you're going to see something of interest here. TCP/IP user ID, there you go. If you for some reason want to not run this under here, there you go. By all means, feel free to change it. This right here is our local host name. There you go, classic. Alright, host name, there you go. If you have a DNS server, plug it in here. If you don't have a DNS server, just keep this commented out. And then of course this is how we're doing this. So then once you've plugged this in, you've pretty much got everything set up. And some of this is kind of ridiculous. If you use well, it actually literally just says if you're sending someone stuff through SMTP, here you go. In case you didn't know that, you can actually do note root at, I don't know, AX72. Alright, thank you. Send. Oh well, it doesn't know that host exists. Well, I guess it's alright. But that's one of the things that TCP/IP data controls. Now, there is also the hosts file. However, I will warn you, I'm not going to discuss configuring the host file, simply because you have to run a few commands in order to generate a host file that can be loaded. And, oh, thank you, DIRMAINT. that's actually the next thing we're going to look at. So let's go ahead and link DIRMAINT 191.791. Let's go ahead and look at everything on disk D of DIRMAINT, which, well, actually disk A of DIRMAINT. And one of these is config data DVH, which is hopefully there. Oh boy, it isn't. And that's because it's actually on disk 11F for some silly goofy reason. Oh well, let's see. Let's get this thing accessed. Okay. This right here. Let's scroll down to where it actually matters. There you go. What you need to do is you need to basically say run mode equals operational, online equals emed, unit in place, yes, work unit online, no. I know that seems counterintuitive, but you know, here we are. And source update, NOP. Anyways, this right here is what you want. And you basically have to manually enable DIRMAINT. And once you've got that enabled, you can now actually add and remove users on the system. I know, amazing concept. So let's add a user now that we know how to do this. So to add a user, just basically start typing. Let's just wing it. So here's how it's done. Basically, you go user, test user, and then a password they want, then the minimum amount of RAM they need, we'll say 60 megs, and then the maximum amount of RAM they need, we'll say 128 megs, and then a privilege class. BG is for a general user. Here you can do include user prof, and then that's basically pretty much it. However, I will say doing it this way is kind of suboptimal, because it doesn't really truly explain what's going on, because user prof is basically a macro. So let's actually expand that. So the first thing you need to do is machine ESA, because obviously this is, you want an ESA virtual machine. What do you want to do? Well, you want to run CMS, obviously. Console is going to be at address 9. It's going to be a 3215 spool class T, and that's going to go to operator if we suddenly get disconnected. And then the line after that is spool 000C 2540 reader star. So this is the address that our punch card reader is at. It's going to be 2540-R, because the 2540 is a combination reader and punch from the 360 days, so we gotta have both. And then we want our punch files to be default class A. And then we can do 1403, which of course is a line printer, class A. And then of course we need our CMS drives, so we'll do link mate 190/190R, link mate 190E/190E, and then link mate 190E/190E. Okay. Now, at this point, we are not going to add any storage. We're going to go ahead and add the user. We're going to go ahead and submit that, and if there's any errors, you'll see them right away. Now, we're going to go take a look at... Alright. And since we added without an issue, we should be pretty much ready to go. Alright, so let's add some storage. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can enroll them in file pool storage, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do this the difficult way. We're going to enroll this user in DASD storage. So what we're going to do is we're going to do DIRM for test user, add minidisk 191. We want it to be 3390 because this is a CKD system. It's going to be on, well, we're going to make it automatically sized, and it's going to be on 240W02, which is a pack that comes default on the system. And we'll say, I don't know, 10 cylinders. And then it's going to be mr, read, write, mult, and those are basically the passwords. And hopefully I got this command syntax right. And I did not. Sorry, it is actually here that you put that. It's our 10 cylinders. And, oops. We'll just leave the minidisk passwords off for now. Alright. Oh boy, there's no more candidate areas. 240W03. Womp womp womp. Well, we have no space. So at this point, you may need to actually add a DASI to the system. It's actually relatively easy to do. The gist of it is you run CP format XA with the disk attached to you. So attach a disk or a full pack DASI to the system, then run CP format XA, CP FMT XA, and then do you basically type parm 0 end and then end like that, and then you do attach, or you detach it, and you do attach 129 system, and then that will add a DASI to the system, and then you can do DIRMAINT to add that. Now let's say you want to purge a user. DIRM for test user purge. Goodbye. The user is gone. So really, it's not too terribly difficult. People make the VM directory out to be literally the worst thing ever made. Let's actually look at the system default directory. As of course we have the system default directory, because this is a pre-cooked system. This is a application development starter system. Now I do have a fully custom installed VMESA 2.4 system, but I'm going to warn you. I recommend not trying to do that on your first try. So this is the system that if you go buy a P390, the person that will sell it will probably sell you this exact CD that has the system on it, honestly. It's pretty common. So this right here specifies where the directory is. This machine is, well, okay, these options here are for the Unix simulator. Don't worry about these. If you mess these up, you got a bad issue. Okay, here's our user prof thing. You remember this is our macro, and of course we're linking to the same stuff, and of course we're linking to main. Sysprof is for system users. There's not really much different about it, I guess. It's just, yeah, you need to automatically have, or you need to manually have these. Okay, GCS prof, this is for users that use the group control system. Here's a sample user. Here's good old-fashioned mate. Mate. That's the default password. These are all saved segments that the user is assigned. These are basically saved systems. Do not leave this off, you'll break your system. And then of course here's every mini disk on the system that is owned by mate. Okay, let's talk about what this syntax is here. This is obviously mini disk. Here's the address of the mini disk. It is stored on 3390. This is the cylinder that it starts at, and this is how many cylinders you get. This is the volume you're storing it on. MR is the default access mode, so multiple write and then read, and then all, which means anyone can access any of these. If it's all for the read password, anyone can access them. Now let me see if I can find someone that has, here we go. Here's something that's a little bit more sophisticated. So here's the default link mode, and then here's the read password, the write password, and then after this is the multiple write password, which in this case we don't have anything that has multiple write password. Maybe we'll get lucky and find one around here in a little bit. Yeah, so there you go. So virtual disk address, disk unit type, start cylinder, how many cylinders you want. Alright, so you can see how it sort of goes in sequence, like 210 plus 2 is 212, 212 plus 2 is 214, plus 42 is 256, plus 6 is 262. There you go. So obviously you want to lay this out, and you want to get your calculator at your side and make sure you do it right, or you could very much so blow your system away. There you go, DB2, yeah, DIRMAINT, yeah, classic. Okay, so not the worst thing in the world, but a little bit on the confusing side. So at this point, you know how to configure TCP/IP. You need to, or you know how to configure the login screen. You know how to configure the system ID. You know to configure how to, you know how to configure the TCP/IP hostname. The only other thing you really need to know how to do is type Autolog, or X-Autolog, I should say. On operator, when you log in as operator after you IPL the system, you're going to get an X-Autolog, or you may get some users that are X-Autologged, because if I link operator 191.991 read, this is my profile exec. It's a modified version of the default, and we execute this Autolog exec. This right here is every single user. Do not use the Autolog 1 user ID to Autolog users. Why? I don't know why. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to edit Autolog 1's profile exec, and Autolog 1 is automatically started by the system. Who knows? Here we are. Anyways, so we Autolog GCS, wait a little bit, erep, DIRMAINT, data move. This is like DIRMAINT's brother, basically. Hot reader, That's exactly what it sounds like. It's basically just a automatic batcher, if you will. And of course, after this, we got our file pools: vmserve recovery, vmserve S for the vmsys file pool, vmsysu, and then for the file pool called sfspool1, which has the same name as the user that runs it. Okay, we're running pvm. Okay, this is odd. For some reason, I bring up pvn and pvmg before I bring up tcp/ip. That was probably a fudge. And of course, here's all of our other stuff. Yada yada yada, and then I detach some datacs so that guests can swoop in and grab them. We are not going to look at running guests under here. Okay, now at this point, the only other thing I can really think to configure is pvm. PVM is basically a do-it-all sort of wannabe networking system for VM. This is what you do. Here's your local host name. This right here is the link address. This is the remote system name. These are CTCAs. This right here is for an IUCV link, potentially to a VSE system. Here's a TCP/IP link. Warning, warning, there's no dot here. Okay? There you go. And down here, we're listening on port 999. There's also profile PVM. This right here will automatically start up your links. You may also need to attach all your CTC link devices to you. And then if you're wondering what PVM looks like, it's just a nice little system. My screen's going to resize when I log into this, but you dial to it like that. And I know you can see the bottom of my terminal emulator. Don't worry, it works once you do it. And I can connect to, I don't know, the VMHPO system. There you go. Easy as that. Pretty useful thing. There's also a terminal multiplexer in here, which is why I bring this up, because PVM is kind of useful for that. But if you're running multiple VM systems, I highly recommend using PVM. But I think I'm going to wrap it up for here. This has already gone on for long enough. But basically, that's my VM administration tutorial. I do apologize for all the strange time shifts in here. This video was stopped and restarted, well, I'm sorry, paused and unpaused probably 50 times throughout the making of that, so I can make it as smooth as possible. And I had the manuals pulled up to make sure that I'm like dead on accurate everything and I'm not messing something up. But in the next one, we're going to look at what it takes to get guests to run under here. So we'll look at running VSE, and we're going to look at running VS. Be safe out there, and don't blow up your system if you're actually watching these as an actual VM systems programmer. Good luck out there, folks. See y'all.